Hello and welcome to the next edition of Lights on Europe. This edition is about European parliamentarism, about the passion for politics, and also a little bit about the advice for the ones who are considering running for politics and maybe afraid of all the risks and fears that it entails. Today we speak to Mouchtar, who is a founder of EU40, a platform which is uniting the younger members of the European Parliament. So for better understanding of our conversation, remember that an MEP stands for Member of the European Parliament. And when it comes to the age of the members, just so you know, out of the 751 members of the European Parliament, the average age is 49 and a half, and it ranges from a 21-year-old Danish MEP to an 82-year-old Italian MEP. So with Adam, we talk about those who are below 40. Hi Adam, welcome to our show. Please tell us what's your surname because I can't pronounce it.
Hi, my surname is Mouchtar.
So who are you? Are you a politician? We met when I was preparing for my MEP campaign early this year, and you were super helpful and inspiring in how you helped me navigate these waters. So are you an insider of the parliament? Are you a politician? Is it just something that you're passionate about?
So I'm definitely passionate about politics, and that's why I think it was great. It's always great to help young and upcoming politicians, especially when you see talent. I am, having been passionate for politics since I'm a kid, basically, and the whole family always was. Arriving in the European Parliament many years ago, I was like a kid in a candy store, you can imagine. So I started off as a political advisor in the European Parliament, and it's always been an exciting place to work because it's, on the one hand, it's the big boys game already, but it's European, and I always felt that, with the mixed background that I have, and being Jewish also, in a way, Europe is the kind of place I want to live. I think it's a good place for people like me, and there are many, for Jews overall, nationalist places have been bad places to live, and I think, multicultural, multinational places have been kind of good for us as a people even. So I could even say that, it's a Jewish place to be, Many people will not want to hear that, I guess, but it's just me being provocative a little bit as well.
But it's interesting that you say, because I hear it a lot from people saying that this is really a new identity that they've received as an addition, obviously, to the national ones. We don't hear that a lot on the ground, but here in our European circles, people really feel it, that they're more European sometimes than being a national of certain member state.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. I mean, and in my case, it really gives me even opportunity for an identity, because you have to imagine I'm an Israeli Scotsman born in London who grew up in Germany. And on my Israeli side, I'm from Iraq originally, hence the name. So, have fun trying to find an identity like that. So, European comes in handy. It's really one I feel passionate and strong about. First and foremost because of the peace concept of it, and then of course for all the many other reasons that come after.
And so now looking at your job, you said it's an exciting place to work. What is the most exciting part of your job? We've had many guests here who mainly work in the European Commission, which is a completely different kind of dynamics and career. European Parliament is different because it's political, it's very national, as we know, because of the MEPs and their identities. So you as an advisor working for multiple MEPs at the same time and having worked for many of them in the groups, what is it that makes it exciting?
I think the essence of what makes is the reason why anyone goes into politics in the first place. So I think the beauty of politics is actually that you can change something, that you can move something, and that you care. And I think that's what many people forget. Politics has such a bad stigma in society all around the world, nearly. And very often politicians are to blame for this. I'm not saying they're scotch-free, obviously. But what people do forget is that the beginning of politics is some people getting together and organizing themselves to make something better. It's usually, the church tower needs renovation. It's usually very local, right? You need a new kindergarten or more kindergarten teachers, or the road needs to lead through the city, or needs to lead around the city, or and people care. They care for themselves, and they care for their community, and they care for others, and then they get together volunteeringly and organize themselves. And this is how politics starts. And actually, most politicians that I work with now, that they have power and they're earning a lot, and people can point at them at being in an ivory tower, But once upon a time they started because they cared about something.
And we hope we stay there. I mean, we hope that they stay there in a place caring about people. But you're very
Absolutely.
big and very passionate about the subject of organization of the politicians and them getting organized around the tribe to leverage their impact and their impact they have on the ground and in the political world. So let's now look at the EU40, the organization that you co-funded, which stands for empowering the younger members of the European Parliament. What is the purpose of the organization? Is it a secret party club? Is it an education platform? Is it a lobby group? What is it?
So, what happened in the history of EU40 is that there were actually a group, again, many years ago, actually just before I came into the Parliament, so in the term 2004 to 2009, and I entered the Parliament in 2006, there were a small group of young members of Parliament, people like, Cecilia Malmström, Nick Clegg, Alexander Stubb, then Alexander Alvaro, and so on, who joined. They were frustrated by the old boys club in the Parliament. They were frustrated that they came in as young, talented politicians wanting to move something, wanting to make a change, and they were told, no, you have to sit back and wait for your turn. Do it like we all did it, and then there's some backroom deals, and that's how they decide who becomes, chair of a committee, who becomes vice president. It's done in some back room between the same, 10 usually old white men, and that's obviously exactly what turns people off politics. So they came in and said, no. We have an electorate. We were voted to do something. I'm not voted to sit here and be just voting meat in Strasbourg once a month. So
and wait until I'm told that I've been around for long enough to have a say.
Exactly. So they wanted to change the way politics communicated. They wanted to make it young and dynamic. And it was actually Alex Alvaro who then picked that up and had the idea to make that. He was that time the youngest member of Parliament, and to make that into a network and call it the EU40, and then he took me on board to start developing the network. So that's the beginning story of EU40, and then from then on, first from his office, and then later on it grew, and then I moved it out, and Alex left the Parliament, and I continued leading it and running it and so on. So that's the story of EU40, and that's very much the essence of the silver lining of why I'm in politics. Because it's fun, it's to see and exhilarating to see such young bright minds and changing things, really making changes. I mean, in the Parliament now, I'm working on something called smart villages, for example. So it's about changing rural areas and making them interesting and making them sexy to live in, bringing technology there and developing it. And we find real money to do it. We find real support to do it. We change. I think I hope to be part and witness how rural areas all across Europe will start becoming more interesting, and see people move back out from cities into rural areas and have higher life quality around the things that are important for us. To raise your kids, to have less criminality, to have better air, less congestion, more options for schools and so on, which are now all problematic because there's too many people living in cities and not enough offers for them anymore. So if too few offers in the countryside because there's not enough people living there, and now you have too few offers in the city because there's too many people living there. So
what's left there in between?
Yeah, and there's a simple solution to it. So that's fun. It's just great. I love coming out of we made one amendment to the Regional Development Fund, and we have 1.3 billion potentially ready to spend on smart villages. That's amazing. That's why I like politics. I think that's a great thing. But yeah.
And so now looking at the results of the European elections that we had in May, I don't know what your numbers are, how many members you actually have in EU40, looking at the results. Tell us a bit more concretely, what can we see coming out of this EU40 space as an empowerment platform? What is it that you're expecting from the young MEPs to drive as a change of the working culture or as drivers of new themes?
I think to do exactly what we said before is to continue to keep politics interesting and appealing to the voters. I mean, obviously, one of the biggest dangers we have in Europe right now is, the anti-Europeans and the nationalists who are trying to destabilize everything that we've built so long since the Second World War. And so far they're doing, a good job, sadly. They've been the better communicators, and they've been reaching people's hearts and minds much better than we have. So that's where we have to be self-critical and ask ourselves why.
So what's your opinion? Where are we failing? Or where is it that the society or the political parties and the candidates can be doing better job to reach the hearts and minds better than the extremists?
I think we have to be less hypocritical, first of all. I think we have to, walk the walk, and after we talk the talk. Very, very often we've been promising things we can't keep, and we've been acting opposite to what we preach, and so on and so on. So I think it's time to become more authentic again, and I think that's actually where the nationalists have been better, because they are more authentic. They actually say what they think, and they say it brutally and honestly, and they're getting applauded for it. So it's about time that we are able to say what we think again too, and that be a positive message. And I do feel that can arrive. I must say, I'm yearning for reason. In such unreasonable times. I think we've lost the ability just to be reasonable. And
I think the courage to be authentic also comes with really saying the uncomfortable truths, because
Absolutely.
The ones that we're applauding to, they're often just screaming the counterproductive lies or calls for destruction of the system, where I feel it's very difficult to say the truth about not having the magical bullet solutions, and the reality out there being difficult, because we're looking for solutions which are compromised across very many countries and cultures and priorities. So I think that's where the challenge comes for us. How can you win the elections while being authentic and saying truth about the difficulty of the whole game at the same time? I
couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also being consequent about the way it works. In the olden days, in especially, let's say, the House of Commons, when it was still reasonable, you would see politics as like a sports match. Nearly, you would understand that everyone in that parliament is in there because they mean well for the country. It was clear that everyone is a patriot. It was clear that everyone wants to solve the problems the country has. They just have different solutions to how to solve the problem. And they would debate these solutions with all opportunity of debate in their hands, and they would learn to debate at university already. And then after the debate and the tackle of words, they would go to a pub and have a pint of beer together and talk about philosophy and anything that interests them, because they understand that they're on the same side, despite being Tories and Labour, for example. And I think this understanding of politics is lost. It starts by being personally attacked for having a different opinion. I think that we as Democrats have made huge mistakes. Often the left has made huge mistakes, for example, to say conservatives are worse human beings. Sorry, they're not. How dare you? I hate to hear that. And of course it goes in both directions, just to use an example. And politicians who said, that don't step down anymore by themselves. They can only be, dragged that from power by their hair. There's something wrong there, right? So there's an element of serving and then knowing when your time's up, and after a lost election to say, well, thank you very much, and I had a good run, and I'm out, and to stay strong by it. I mean, even for myself, look, I'm now stepping out of EU40. Why? For the simple reason was I've crossed the 40 border, so I'm just staying. I've become old. Middle-aged, I think is what's called, and with that came a bit more wisdom, but also the understanding that I have to move my seat for people who are younger and more dynamic, and continue to develop the vision of EU40, and I think I'm very proud to do that.
I think that's what the true leadership is, to develop your own baby, your organization, and then pass it on to your successor that you've also educated and helped raise yourself. So it's not that you would completely disappear from the organization. What's the next engagement that's ahead of you?
Well, I mean, I said earlier, Smart Villages is now my... So
that's going to be your new job?
That is now my new... So the 3 members of Parliament I work for all 3 of them, I'll be developing the Smart Village idea, and we're going to create an intergroup in the Parliament. So, check out the Smart Villages intergroup website. It's already up. And so I think we're going to have some great changes to look forward to there.
And so tell us a little bit, what is the main message that you're passing on to your successor? We know who that is. Hi to Alessandro. what is the legacy that you're leaving behind, and what is the change that you would like him to be leading towards now that we are at the beginning of the next period of the new parliament?
Well, I mean, the most difficult thing when you run a network is always to get the engagement of the actual members of the network. So I think often for politicians, communication can be a one-way game. I think there's another mistake. I think there is a lot of ego trips and a lot of self-marketing, let's say, and they forget about the other side of the conversation, and that can be with a citizen on the street, it can be on social media, but it can be also with anyone who supports him or her in politics. So EU40 tries to be a platform and support politicians, young politicians who are still backbenchers, and bring them to the front, so to speak. And in return, it would be nice for those politicians to kind of take ownership of EU40 and be engaged and also change EU40, because that's how a network works. It needs to be dynamic, it needs to be organic and not static. So that's one of the things I have not quite solved over the many years I've run EU40. So I hope maybe Alec can do better there.
I would like to come back to this point of ego tripping that we've been discussing for a while now. Do you think it's something that is typical of this new generation of politicians coming in? Also because of how comfortable we feel with social media, and we've been in this online ego tripping world for a bit longer, or it's much more authentic for us to navigate a space than probably for the previous generations? Do you think it's something that is a downside of the new generation coming in, this superficiality of the communication, or it's simply individuals who are more ego trippers than others, and you can't really generalize it?
Yeah, there's a difficult answer to it. I think social media definitely has changed the way we communicate. I think there's two sides to the medal of social media. There's a very, very positive side, because you can reach people very directly and very kind of unfazed and unfiltered, which I think is good. The negative side is this kind of this self-conversation that people are leading all the time. I mean, just in the first weeks after Parliament started, before the summer break, the amount of my of the EU40 MEPs, filming themselves in their office a million times and posting that was a bit much, I'm meeting this influencer now. I mean, people go and meet influencers, and then the next, if I go along on Instagram, the next story I see is then the influencer meeting the politician. Exactly. And it's just like their stories are turning in circles, and I actually wonder that's not communication anymore. It doesn't seem. But that's I think a philosophy of life. There's always two sides to a coin, to anything.
And it's also probably part of their learning process. Since they are new to the system, they also try to kind of remove this veil of misunderstanding for their voters. And at the beginning, all of them are showing what is the working space and how their daily routine works. So there's a lot of this that since we are inside of the bubble, we keep seeing the same stories every day, because it's reporting of the same situation from multiple sources. And so we'll be curious to see, once they become much more comfortable with the political cycle, getting much more rolling, to see how much of the content will start coming into their communication, and how much of a bi-directional communication it will be about the content, because the content as such is so complicated for general public to understand that I think it takes a lot of mastery for the politicians to be able to explain it in layman's terms. And also, I guess it's a bit of a leadership challenge for them to decide how you split the resources across the teams, because you have to have super smart people on the team, which will help you with the political process, but then you have to have resources on the side also for the communication, which can be very energy draining and also resource consuming. Yeah. So it's a difficult balance to strike.
Yeah. No, absolutely, 100% it's true.
Yeah.
And then there's many elements. I mean, it's very human. It's very, very human that if you are treated differently by the outside world, if people are making a larger effort to treat you well because you're an elected official, that you start to forget that they're doing that because of the title and not because of you being a better person, right? So that differentiation is just hard to keep. I think you also need to be a big person, or very, it needs training to come home and to just be the human again, and not anymore be the title.
Yes.
I think, and that's very true for pop stars, for actors, for anyone who's in the limelight always. I think the confusion happens very fast, and it's more than natural. But
you like being in the limelight as well. When I was checking some videos of you,
true?
I found the rapping event that you told me about a while ago. Would you like to rap for us?
No, I don't know. But the whole point. So thanks for mentioning our hip hop battle that we do regularly, and we'll be doing again in Strasbourg next year, of course. And I love hip hop, and I grew up listening to hip hop. Very much
so is it the MEPs on the battle, or who's doing?
So part of the trick of EU40 when we do a bit of fun communications, I mean, what we never burn our members, right? So this is something you learn as an assistant in the parliament. First and foremost, is you never burn your boss, right? Because you go down with them. So when we do things like that, we make sure that people it won't be cringy, right? We don't want to have a cringe element. So we get professional hip hoppers in, and it's the politicians who give the arguments to the rappers, and the rappers then put it into rhyme, and that way you have rappers with perfect rhymes and perfect arguments, thanks to the politicians who are whispering in their ear. So that's kind of the brilliance of that event, and it works really well.
Excellent. Are these all your own creations, or do you have organizations that serve as your inspiration in other administrative systems that you're learning from?
Well, I do think that I'm somewhat a creative person, so yes, often it's my own ideas. In the case of the rap battle, I have to be very, very honest and give my respect to Jim Cheng, who's now in Switzerland banking somewhere, I think. But we used to, Matteo, Jim, and I used to get together and just, we were three nerds in a room and just spin ideas. And that was one of the ideas that came up between three of us. I think it was Jim's idea, actually. And then, of course, we built onto it and so on, and Matteo and I added. And then we had that very first rap battle, which was, seems like a long, long time ago, I think in 2009. And we had 1,000 people lining up in front of the parliament.
Okay, cool.
So it was a fun part. You can still find it on the EU40, not the joint part, but you can still find the rap battle on the website. Yeah,
yes.
Some of them are still MEPs today that took part in it. So it was.
And so this is a very saturated space of networks here in Brussels, and so you really did manage to elevate the bar of how funny it can be and creative, and you are like super original, I find, in the events that you're organizing and in the quality of the communication that you're doing. What is the piece of wisdom that you're usually passing on to other networks that exist either in Brussels, in the institutions, or outside, or in other countries? How do you leverage the networks? How do you organize them so that the members are really heard? Because ultimately it's about this, giving members a much stronger voice to be heard for the cause that they're fighting for.
There's no easy answer to that. But I think, being innovative is definitely an important element. I do try to not be lazy and keep reinventing the wheel. So what many organizations do is they have a successful event, or they do something well, and then they just start copy-pasting it. And there's a lot of copy-pasting also from other people's successes, which is a natural thing to do. But then, of course, it will become boring and old very fast. And people like new and like different, and they like to be touched. And I think bringing a human element is definitely good. In the rap battle, we brought in a cool element, I think, clearly. So that I think bringing cool to politics was about time. I've always loved the nerd cool combination. That was always my thing. I used to belong to the cool kids in the school, but I was the only one who loved politics in that group. And I would start talking about politics, and they would all be bored. So then I would hang out with the nerds. And then each group could not understand why I would hang out with either of them. And I knew why in both cases, but I never understood why it can't be combined. So that's been a little bit of my mission.
This
in
resonates
politics.
so much with me, because that's also why I'm doing this podcast, that I try to convert the nerdy European Commission, European official job into giving it a bit of a coolness to it. So hopefully the guests.
If we're being cool right now, I'm not sure, but nerds we are for sure. Yeah.
And so the last question that I would like to ask you is now, thinking ahead, we are now after the elections period, and I keep already receiving messages and calls from some people asking me if I wanted to run in 5 years, what am I supposed to do, how to go about it, I don't know which party to choose.
First question I asked you, yeah?
If you were to give an advice to somebody who feels called to speak up and enter this political arena, but they are told by everybody around them that they're not good enough, that it's dirty business, that they don't have enough political leverage or enough of a name recognition, how would you support them for them to really have the courage to embark on this journey without really knowing where they're going?
Patience and tenacity. Two qualities I don't have, and that's maybe why I'm not in politics actively, just passively. Patience and tenacity. I think if you for politics, also for politicians, already elected politicians, it's very, very true. You hit into the same place at the tree again and again and again, and one day the tree will fall. Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Then you have to make sure what direction the tree falls in. But it's absolute. That's a very, very apt comment. So those are the two things. You don't hit, from up to down. You hit into the same place, but then make sure the tree also falls in the right direction, doesn't crush a house on the way. That is a very real danger in politics, as we all know, or yourself. Yes.
And the tenacity.
Same thing. You stay at it. I mean, you have to stay at it. It comes round. There is, in a way, success in politics is like a blue moon. It happens at some point. The stars are in the right constellation, always at some point. But when they are, you have to be ready to then look at the moon. So you have to know that you're waiting for a blue moon. Every person will experience at least one blue moon in his life. But maybe he's sitting watching his favorite sitcom and he'll miss it. So, I mean, you have to, be tenacious enough to look out the window every night and look at the moon, and eventually the stars will align.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you very much, and all the best on your new journey.